Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. Have you ever felt your privacy vanish in the blink of an app? That strange, creeping sense that someone knows more about you than they should, more than anyone could without watching, following, calculating? I did, and it almost destroyed me. My name is Claire. I was 33, newly moved to a small city after a messy breakup that left me hollowed, shaking, and second-guessing everything I once took for granted. My apartment smelled faintly of detergent and coffee, lonely in its silence. My phone buzzed constantly, yet none of the messages mattered. I was trying to rebuild myself quietly, one small step at a time. That night it rained. The kind of rain that turns city streets into rivers of neon. Streetlights reflected off wet asphalt like fractured glass. Distant sirens echoed faintly, and soft jazz hummed from an apartment across the street. I had stayed late at work, editing a presentation, and when I finally stepped outside, the smell of wet asphalt hit me like a cold slap. I opened the Uber app. A ride to my apartment. A simple, mundane decision I had made countless times before. I entered my address, checked the ETA, and within minutes, the car pulled up, black sedan, headlights slicing through the foggy street. "Claire?" The driver asked, voice calm, measured. Not a greeting, exactly, more like confirmation, almost precise. "Yes," I said, sliding into the back seat. The door clicked shut, and I realized how alone I was. The hum of the engine, the faint drip of rain from my coat, the distant buzz of the streetlight outside. The city had compressed into a narrow, claustrophobic tube around me. He drove without asking where I wanted to go. Just drove. Smoothly. Carefully. I glanced at the GPS on my phone. The route was familiar, but not quite. A shortcut I didn't usually take. "You always take this route?" he asked casually. I frowned. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because it's your favorite. You like seeing the skyline from the bridge at night. The lights reflect off the river. You always take a picture." My hands went icy. My coffee cup rattled in the cup holder. I had never posted that anywhere. Never mentioned it to anyone. I guess I fumbled. "I like the view." He didn't miss a beat. "I know. I've seen you do it. Last Thursday, 10:37 p.m. I laughed nervously. My pulse surged. I think you're joking." "No joke," he said calmly, eyes forward. His hands gripped the wheel with an almost invisible tension. "I've been following your rides for weeks." "Weeks?" The word hit me like ice. "Weeks of what?" "Of him." What?" I whispered. My throat felt dry. My fingers fumbled with my phone. Maybe I could call someone. Maybe I could do something. "The routes you take, your favorite coffee at the corner cafe, your evenings at the bookstore, your patterns." "I know everything," he said quietly. Not menacing, just precise. Almost intimate. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he had been making observations from the street. Maybe I was overreacting. I told myself it made sense. I repeated it in my head like a mantra. "It makes sense. It's nothing. It's nothing." But my gut twisted tighter with each word. I wanted to stop him, to get out, to run, but the car's locks clicked when I tried the handle. I was trapped. Over the next few minutes, he started recounting smaller details. My morning routine. The way I held my pen when I was thinking. How I tilted my head when I listened to music. My old nickname from high school. Every detail I thought was private, every habit invisible, now cataloged. "I don't understand," I whispered. "How do you know all this?" "I've been multiple drivers," he said simply. "Different cars, different profiles. Only one person ever sees me at a time. But I've been everywhere you've gone." Quietly, my pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to believe him, but not like this. Not the calm, controlled precision in his voice. We passed my apartment building. I stared at the door, desperate, thinking about the keys in my bag. "Please, just let me out," I whispered. "You will," he said. "But I wanted to see if you noticed. You always do what's expected, even when things feel off." I swallowed hard. "Why are you doing this?" Because people like to think they're alone. Private. Safe. I want to see how far that illusion holds. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the soft hum of the engine, the distant wipers hitting the rain-slicked windshield, the faint glow of neon reflecting off my trembling face, made me freeze. Every nerve screamed. The car drove a block further. My apartment was just ahead. The lights of my building glimmered in the drizzle. I wanted to bolt, but he was calm, too calm, and I couldn't predict his next move. "You should know," he said quietly, almost conversationally. "This isn't personal. It's pattern recognition. Observation. I'm careful." "Careful?" I echoed. My hands shook. I wanted to crawl under the seat, to disappear into shadows. "Yes. Careful," he said. "I've been following dozens of people this way. Some notice, most don't. Most go home and feel safe. I'm testing boundaries." I didn't respond. My fingers were gripping the seatbelt. My heart felt like it might explode. Every neon reflection off wet streets, every muted buzz of a nearby sign, every distant siren felt magnified. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and quick, like I was about to be unmade. Finally, he pulled up to my building. "You're safe now," he said, voice steady. I didn't move. I didn't look at him. I opened the door slowly, every second stretched, like time itself was conspiring against me. My pulse in my ears, my hands trembling, keys fumbled. I got out and ran up the stairs to my apartment, fumbling in the rain to unlock the door. Once inside, I leaned against it, gasping, heart hammering. The hum of my apartment, fridge, heater, distant traffic, never felt so comforting. But I knew. Someone had cataloged my every habit, my every routine, my every quiet moment. I called the police. They traced the ride, multiple accounts, multiple cars. Each ride seemed normal on the surface, but the pattern of drivers, the repeated attention, the documentation, it was deliberate. He wasn't hacking, not through social media or tech. He was using the app itself, fake accounts, fake profiles, to watch, to catalog, to intrude. I spent days after that checking locks, checking routes, changing my routines. Friends noticed I was jumpy, distracted, haunted. Every reflection, every shadow, every unfamiliar car in the street was suspect. Weeks later, after investigation, the police identified him. His obsession spanned multiple cities, multiple victims, multiple accounts, pattern stalking disguised as technology and routine. Calm, intelligent, precise. I survived. I rebuilt. But I am not the same. I can never feel privacy in the same way. Every app one open, every map I use, every ride I take, I think about who is watching, calculating, cataloging, waiting for the next misstep. Even now, when it rains, when neon reflects off streets, when distant music drifts through a window, I think of his calm, quiet voice. The way he cataloged me. The way he watched, just to see how obedient I was, just to see if I noticed. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. That someone doesn't need access to your accounts. They just need time, patience, and a system that lets them observe. And if your gut tells you something is off, listen. It might be the only thing keeping you alive. Story 2. I remember the first time I realized I wasn't just lost. That night, the rain had started early, the kind that sticks to your hair and runs down your neck, cold enough to feel like it knows you. My phone buzzed against my thigh as I waited for the Uber outside the apartment building I'd barely settled into. It had been 3 weeks since the divorce, and the walls of this new city were still unfamiliar and different. I was alone in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be in years, and I could feel it pressing against me, heavy and relentless. The party had been an escape. I didn't know the hosts well, someone from a dating app, someone with a name that promised warmth I hadn't felt in months. But the music, the low hum of conversation, and the distant jazz from the corner bar had felt like a thin thread of normalcy. I left early. I told myself I was tired, that I needed to rest. Truth was, I needed the quiet. When the car arrived, a black SUV, sleek, tinted windows, I slid into the back seat, letting the warmth of the engine seep into my cold fingers. The driver said nothing at first, just nodded, eyes on the road. The city was wet, neon bleeding into puddles, reflections quivering like they knew how fragile I was. I opened the app. The route home looked familiar. Right along Main, cut through the side streets by the cafe I liked, left past the small corner park, then the long, empty avenue toward my building. I checked the ETA. 15 minutes. Easy. Safe. Until he ignored the first turn. Aren't we supposed to? My voice was soft, uncertain. Alternate route, he said, calm. Neutral. His tone wasn't dismissive, but it carried a precision that made me pause. Too precise. I swallowed. Okay. I told myself it made sense. Traffic. Construction. Maybe he knew something the app didn't. We drove. I watched the streets blur through the rain-streaked window. Neon reds, blues, and oranges stretched into streaks across my vision. Something about the way the windshield wipers smudged the city felt wrong, like the world had been smeared deliberately, so I couldn't place where I was. I tried to focus on the app again. It glitched. The little blue dot representing the car skipped, stuttered, jumped backward. Turned the corner twice, then back again. I frowned. GPS must be off, I muttered to myself. Signal's weak. That's all. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe he was just a competent driver taking a detour, that I was overthinking. Then he spoke. You're quiet tonight, he said, voice calm, almost intimate. Not small talk, not casual. Observant. Attentive. I shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, just thinking. I know that look. I looked at him in the rearview mirror. Mid-30s, dark hair, a kind of patience that could lull someone into trust. A face you could leave your life story with. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe someone could be safe in this city. How do you know? I asked. He smiled faintly, just enough to make me doubt my own fear. People tell me. Everyone tells me. It's why I do this job. To observe. To help. I laughed nervously. Help how? By listening. By noticing. His eyes met mine through the mirror. You like the jazz cafe on Pine, don't you? The one with the low wooden stools? I froze. How? He shrugged lightly. You walked past it twice this week. Your phone has a playlist open. Blue and green. It's Miles Davis, right? My chest tightened. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he had an ear for music. Maybe he just guessed. But the exact playlist, the exact song, it was too precise. And that was the first moment I realized I wasn't alone in the way I had thought. We continued, turn after turn, deeper into streets I didn't recognize. Each block looked wrong. Familiar buildings twisted into new shapes. Reflections in the wet asphalt glimmered as if they had been stretched. Should we go back? I asked, voice trembling slightly. We're fine, he said. Trust me. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. The app glitching became worse. It reset. The route to my building reloaded like nothing had happened. 15 minutes. ETA unchanged. But the streets outside were different. I watched the same neon-lit cafe appear, the same empty park, the same corner I knew, but each iteration slightly off. A tree moved. A sign was missing. A window reflected light differently. I bit my lip. This isn't right. He leaned slightly, just enough to close the distance. It's fine. You'll be home soon. You always are. I wanted to rationalize. Maybe I'm just tired. I've been moving a lot. Sleep deprived. Maybe I'm imagining things. The air inside the car was warm, almost comforting. A faint scent of cedar. Leather. Colder city air seeped in from the cracked window. Rain tapping against the roof. The hum of the engine. A siren somewhere far away. A distant saxophone from an open bar window. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself the driver was just good at noticing details. But the next block confirmed I wasn't. The same pedestrian passed us twice. Same jacket, same slow pace, same umbrella flipping in the wind. Only we weren't moving in circles. Or we were. I couldn't tell. The voice came again, calm, unhurried. Do you see him? I looked. Who? Nothing, he said. Just a friend. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe anyone. By now, I had stopped looking at the app. Its blue dot blinked, jumped, and reset. Each time it promised home. Each time it led us further into the city's labyrinth. We passed a cafe I'd never been in. Its neon open sign flickered in the wet mist. Inside, I could see a single figure, coat pulled tight, face turned away. My heart skipped. The driver's voice. "You know that street. You pass it every Thursday." I tried to rationalize. "I do. I take that street to avoid traffic sometimes." He smiled faintly. "See?" I wanted to believe it made sense. I wanted to believe the familiarity was coincidence. But then he said my name. Full name. First and last. Calm. Intimate. I felt my pulse in my ears. My hands trembled on my thighs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to open the door and run. But the streets outside were deserted. The rain-slicked asphalt reflected neon like molten glass. "You're safe," he said, "as long as you stay calm." I tried to tell myself he was just persuasive, charming, observant, but there was something in his eyes. The way he watched my reactions, the tiny adjustments of his hands on the wheel, the slow nods to himself. It was measured, calculated. Hours, or maybe minutes, later, I realized the pattern. Streets repeated. Buildings reappeared in the same sequence. Trees bent the same way. Reflections mirrored themselves. We were trapped. I tried my phone. Emergency call. No signal. 911 couldn't connect. I couldn't even access Google Maps. The app refused to open. It reset, showing the same route as before. 15 minutes. ETA, 15 minutes. But I wasn't home. I wanted to believe it was a glitch. I wanted to believe I was overthinking. I wanted to believe he was just a skilled driver testing me, playing some odd psychological game. Then he touched my arm. Lightly. Observant. Intentional. "You're worried," he said. "I can feel it. Your pulse. Your breathing. You want to fight it, but it's easier if you relax." I jerked back. You know all of that?" He smiled. "Just a little. I notice. People leave patterns. They forget. They don't realize. But I do." The city blurred outside. Neon red, neon blue, wet asphalt, reflections of myself in windows. The GPS blinked, glitched, reset. "Loop." He said, "You're tired. You've been moving. New city. Divorce. Alone. Lonely. I can help with that. You want someone to notice you, to care." I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But the doors were locked. The streets were empty. I was alone with him. At some point, I realized he had known where I kept my favorite jacket. He knew the playlist on my phone. He referenced a friend I hadn't spoken to in months, a joke only I remembered. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself it made sense. It didn't. Hours, or maybe a fraction of hours, later, flashing lights appeared behind us. A police cruiser. Another. Their sirens cut through the rain, muffled but precise. The driver didn't resist. Calmly pulled over. Calmly handed me my bag and phone. Calmly stepped out. And for the first time, I saw his full face in the rearview mirror. It was a face I would never forget. Observant. Charming. Deadly in its precision. A serial manipulator. A hunter. Someone who had isolated me without leaving a trace. Without digital evidence. Police questioned me, asked for everything: apps, phones, recent history. Evidence of tracking. Logs. They traced nothing useful. He had erased it all. Disappeared. I went home that night, rain still dripping from the gutters. My apartment smelled like nothing. Cold linoleum, faint coffee. My bed untouched, waiting. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside. Cars in the distance, neighbors' televisions, the occasional footsteps in the hallway. I realized how fragile everything had been. Trust. Privacy. Safety. I slept a little, finally. But my dreams were filled with endless streets, looping reflections, and the calm, intimate voice that had known me so completely. Years later, I still think about him when I walk alone. When my phone buzzes with an unknown number. When the GPS glitches on a familiar route. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens. It's knowing that someone can know you entirely, manipulate you entirely, and vanish before you even understand what's real. We think our lives are linear, safe, predictable, but someone out there can bend that, fold it, isolate it, and the loop doesn't always end. It just waits for the next passenger. Story 3. Rain had been falling for hours. Not the soft, forgiving drizzle of early spring, but that relentless, cold October rain that turns city streets into mirrors. Neon lights fractured across puddles, and every reflection felt like it was watching. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, shoulders hunched, and stared at the Uber icon on my phone. I had moved to this city 2 months ago, alone, rebuilding myself after a breakup that left more than just a hollow heart. It left a quiet, gnawing doubt in my mind. Every text unanswered, every coffee cup untouched, every step through my apartment felt like walking through a vacuum. My parents' divorce had been years ago, but somehow it was still bleeding into me. Into every room, into every ride. I tapped Request Uber and waited. The driver's name flashed on my screen, Caleb. The ETA, 3 minutes. The car, a black Honda Civic. The rain beat against the windshield as I slid into the back seat. Warmth, the faint scent of cedar air freshener, the hum of the heater vibrating through my thighs. I tried to settle into normalcy. Evening, he said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Calm, almost too calm. His voice carried a certain careful observation, like he already knew the answers to the questions he hadn't asked. Hi, I mumbled, shivering, my hands wrapped around my phone. Traffic crawled in front of us. Street lamps cast long, trembling shadows. I watched neon signs refract across the wet glass of the door. A 24-hour diner, a florist, a laundromat humming with fluorescent light. You moved recently? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, a couple of months. New place. Apartment alone. I wanted to say more, to explain, to fill the silence, but I didn't. And that was when the first odd thing happened. The back seat, where I was sitting, shimmered. Almost imperceptibly, like heat rising off asphalt, but colder. The air seemed to thin just around me. I glanced at Caleb in the mirror. His eyes flicked down to the center console, and he murmured something under his breath. I didn't catch it, but the cadence was familiar, intimate. I blinked. The shimmer vanished. Did you say something? I asked. He looked at me, expression neutral. Just thinking out loud. I shrugged, telling myself it made sense. That I was imagining things. That my sleep-deprived brain, my nervous anticipation, had misread the reflection of the neon. But then I noticed it. The phone charger, dangling from the port near the cup holder, swaying gently. No car movement. No wind. Just swaying. Maybe it's the heater, I muttered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes, fixed on the rearview mirror, suggested he was talking to someone invisible. I pressed my hands against my thighs, trying to anchor myself in reason. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I had been alone too long. Maybe it was the storm. But then the whispers started. Soft, unintelligible at first, breathing through syllables that weren't mine. I could feel them brushing against the back of my neck, against the base of my skull. I swallowed. Do you hear that? I asked, my voice barely above the hum of the heater. He kept his eyes forward. Hear what? I exhaled slowly. Of course he didn't. Of course he couldn't. That's how it worked, I realized. Only I could hear it. Only I could see it. We passed a small cafe, its neon orange, open sign reflected like a smudge on the wet pavement. I glanced down. My bag shifted. A pen rolled across the seat. No one touched it. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia. I wanted to convince myself it was mundane. But the whispering grew louder, circling my thoughts like water draining in a sink. Jenna, it murmured. I froze. My real name. Not my username, not my social media handle. My actual name. I looked at Caleb in the mirror. His gaze remained forward. Focused. Oblivious. I gripped my phone, checking messages, emails, social feeds. Nothing unusual. Nothing new. I closed my eyes. Deep breaths. Heart hammering. Rational thoughts spinning in a tight spiral. I told myself, it's just me. It's just the storm. It's just loneliness making ghosts out of shadows. But then the whisper said again, louder, clearer. You don't have to hide. The hairs on my arms rose. The pen rolled closer to the seat edge, tipped, then stopped abruptly, as if held by something unseen. Caleb spoke softly. Not to me, not aloud. I hear you. I see you. The words weren't meant for me, but they were. My stomach dropped. I wanted to say something, ask a question, but I didn't. I pressed my palms into my eyes, shut the storm, shut the car, shut everything out. When I looked again, the shimmer returned. Subtle at first, then more pronounced. The back seat wasn't quite empty. Not entirely. A figure, transparent, wavering like mist, sat in the corner behind me. Shoulder-length hair, slumped posture, expression unreadable. I blinked. The neon reflected across the glass. The rain hammered the roof. The engine purred. The figure, just for an instant, looked directly at me and smiled. I jumped, my breath catching. My hand pressed against the door handle. I wanted to open it, flee into the rain, disappear into the night. But the figure didn't move, didn't reach, just watched. Caleb, still driving, didn't see it, didn't acknowledge it, didn't react. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, maybe a hallucination, maybe fatigue. I told myself it made sense. Where do you live? Caleb asked, suddenly, almost conversational. I hesitated. Near the river. He nodded, like he already knew. And then, unnervingly, he said, You like the cafe on 5th. You always order the chamomile latte. You keep your receipts in the bottom drawer of your bag. My chest tightened. I opened my bag. He was right. Every detail exact. My favorite pen, my notebook, my receipts, neatly stacked. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he noticed me before. I whispered to myself. Maybe he's just attentive. But the figure behind me whispered again. A soft, low, almost sorrowful sound. It's mine. It was mine. I turned, but the seat was empty. The shimmer gone. The whispers stopped. The ride continued, unnervingly normal. Caleb hummed along to a soft jazz station. The rain streaked the windows. The city outside blurred into neon streaks and wet asphalt. I tried to convince myself I was imagining everything. Tried to laugh. Tried to think of my breakup, my move, the loneliness, the fear of being invisible in a new city. But my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You saw her. She saw you. I froze. Caleb glanced at the rearview mirror. Smiled faintly. Everything okay back there? I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. Yeah, just cold. The ride ended. I stumbled out into the rain, drenched, trembling. I didn't thank him. I didn't look back. I walked fast through empty streets, past fogged cafe windows, past silent apartment buildings, past neon reflections fractured across puddles. I didn't realize it until later, but something had shifted inside me. My sense of reality, my trust, the way I moved through the city at night, the way I breathed in empty apartments, the way I answered unknown numbers. Weeks later, I found the story in the news. A young woman had died in a car accident. Same make, same model, same license plate as my ride. The driver survived. No one else involved. I didn't know if it was coincidence or something else. But I remembered the shimmer, the whispers, the figure, and I remembered Caleb, completely oblivious, entirely normal, yet somehow complicit in my terror by simply existing in that space. I never took another Uber alone at night. I avoid black cars. I avoid soft jazz. I avoid chamomile lattes. I think about her sometimes, the girl who died, still sitting there, still waiting, still speaking. Sometimes I wonder, did she reach out to me or did I reach out to her? And I wonder what it means to truly see someone, to be alone with them. The city streets are still mirrors. The rain still reflects neon. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I feel her presence in the back seat, watching, waiting, whispering. Trust is fragile. Privacy is an illusion. And memory, your own and others, can be borrowed, stolen, or shared in ways that make you question everything. Sometimes, surviving isn't about escaping. It's about learning how to live in the shadow of what's already happened. and some rides never really end. Story 4. I had never been alone in a city that felt so loud. Rain drummed against the streets in quick, uneven taps, and neon signs bled color across slick pavement, reflecting like fractured memories in puddles. I walked past cafes with warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, imagining someone inside laughing over coffee, and it made me ache for company I didn't have. I had just moved. New apartment, new job, new life, or at least the idea of one. After the divorce, after the months of emotional decay, after the arguments that left bruises invisible to everyone else, I thought I could rebuild. The first few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Nights stretched endlessly, humming with the low buzz of the refrigerator and the distant pulse of traffic outside my window. My phone buzzed sometimes, dating app matches, work emails, friends I hadn't called, but the messages felt empty. I felt empty. It was Thursday, rainy, and I just finished a late shift at the boutique hotel where I worked the front desk. I slipped outside, coat pulled tight, hair plastered to my neck, and summoned an Uber. My hands were shaking slightly from fatigue, but also from something else, a low, persistent anxiety that I chalked up to exhaustion. The car arrived, a black Prius, headlights cutting through the mist. I slid into the back, the familiar scent of upholstery and faint air freshener, the quiet hum of the engine. Then I noticed it, a shape. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, shadows stretching across the seat in front of me. Then I realized it was a person, sitting there, still, hidden in the shadows. I glanced around. No one else had entered. I hadn't requested a second passenger. My stomach nodded. Hello," I said softly. No reply, just the quiet hum of the heater, the windshield wipers dragging rhythmically across glass. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a reflection, a trick of the rain and the dashboard glow. I tried to ignore it, but every time I turned my head, it had shifted. Closer. Not much, but enough that I noticed. And always silent. "Miss, are you okay back there?" The driver's voice was calm, neutral, professional. "Yes, I think so," I said, my voice tighter than intended. I didn't dare look back directly. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe my account had been hacked. Maybe the app glitched. Maybe it was my imagination. I wanted to believe it. The ride continued, streets slick with neon reflections and fog rolling along the sidewalks. The city seemed alive in the kind of way that made me feel exposed. Every cafe window, every glowing sign, every shadowed doorway felt like a mirror of my isolation. Then the driver spoke again, calm, measured. "You've been walking a lot tonight. Long day?" "Yes." "Work," I said, staring at the road ahead, avoiding the shadow behind me. "You're new here, right?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted, and then added hesitantly, "just moved." "Starting over?" His tone wasn't probing. It was almost attentive, intimate. I know that feeling. There was a pause, the wipers keeping a steady rhythm. Then, just as subtly, he added, "It's easy to feel invisible in a place like this." I shivered, not from cold. By the time we reached the bridge over the river, the rain had eased, leaving everything slick and glossy, street lights mirrored on the wet asphalt. I caught my reflection in the window and froze. Behind me, the shadow hadn't receded. It had shifted closer again. My breath hitched. I told myself it made sense. Maybe I had seen a jacket in the backseat pocket, the way light hit it. Maybe I was tired. When I arrived at my apartment, I fumbled with my keys, heart hammering in a way that felt both physical and abstract. The shadow was still there. I stepped out of the car, slammed the door gently behind me, and breathed a little easier. I didn't sleep well that night. Morning came with a pale gray drizzle, the apartment humming quietly, familiar sounds magnified in the emptiness. Refrigerator, radiator, distant traffic, a faint jazz track playing from a neighbor's window. My phone buzzed. A notification from Uber, ride receipt. I glanced at it. Everything seemed normal. Driver, time, route. Nothing out of place. But then I noticed a tiny detail, an overlay on the map. A small blue dot that wasn't me, hovering near the rear passenger seat, moving in perfect sync with the shadow I had seen. I froze. I played the ride back in my mind. Everything the driver said, the observations that felt almost intimate. About my walk, my fatigue, my hesitation. How could he have known these things? I called Uber support. They confirmed my account had been accessed from another device during the night. My ride had been modified, with a phantom passenger added to the trip. Someone was controlling the experience, feeding the driver live coordinates for a passenger that didn't exist. I tried to rationalize it. A hacker, yes, but someone just messing with data. Not watching me. I wanted to believe it. The next day, I went to a small cafe near my apartment. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the neon signs still faint in the morning haze. I sat near the window watching the street, sipping black coffee, trying to feel normal. He appeared then. Not in the car, not obviously, but in my peripheral vision. A man at the counter, ordering quietly, scanning the room. Something about the way he observed, patient, measured, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was coincidence, but then he smiled slightly at the barista, just enough that I caught his gaze through the reflection in the window. Familiar. Too familiar. I started noticing things over the next week. Little coincidences that shouldn't have been coincidences. The pattern of my morning walks. The exact coffee I ordered. The book I was reading. His timing was precise, almost impossible. He was never intrusive, never confrontational. Just present. In the background. Always watching. I met a man named Alex at work around this time. Friendly, calm, attentive in a way that felt soothing. He asked about my favorite coffee, remembered my favorite songs, listened to me vent about my divorce without judgment. For a while, I allowed myself to feel safe. I told myself I could trust him, but then I noticed little impossibilities. He knew details I never told him. The exact ringtone I had on my phone, the pattern of my apartment's lights, the small scratches on the floorboards from moving boxes. Things I only realized later, when I replayed memories in my head. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he was observant. Maybe I had left clues in conversation. Maybe I was overthinking. The unease escalated. My phone buzzed at night with notifications from apps I never opened. My emails had slight changes, typos I hadn't written. The GPS on my phone pinged to locations I hadn't visited. My reflection in the elevator sometimes felt delayed, as if someone had watched me move before I did. I started leaving the apartment doors locked at odd times, double-checked the peephole, installed cameras I didn't fully trust. Every sound became significant. Floor creaks, soft humming of appliances, distant footsteps, a neighbor's door closing. I wanted to believe I was paranoid. Then the messages began. Voice notes. Calm, precise, just my name. Whispered, from an unknown number. I recognized the voice. The same tone from the Uber ride. My stomach dropped. I realized he had been controlling my fear in real time. The shadow, the car, the coordinates, the observations, the timing, they were all orchestrated. The Uber ride had been the beginning, not the anomaly. I confronted Alex. Calmly. I tried to reason with him. His eyes didn't flinch. You've been very interesting, he said softly. Observant. Curious. I just wanted to understand. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to think he cared. But every instinct screamed danger. I left my apartment that night, carrying my phone, my keys, every precaution I could imagine. Every reflection, every shadow, every sound was heightened. I walked to a 24-hour diner, lights bright, staff attentive. Safe. For now. The police traced the hacked Uber account, the GPS overlay, the burner phones. They confirmed it was a coordinated effort to manipulate me, to observe me, to control me. Alex was one of several identities. Multiple victims, multiple locations. It took months to untangle the network, to recover the sense of autonomy I had lost. But even after the evidence, the arrests, the closure, I couldn't stop hearing the whispers. Now, years later, I still check the back seat before climbing into a rideshare. I notice shadows and reflections. I pause at every unfamiliar knock. I feel the cold ghost of orchestrated observation on my skin, like a second memory. And I've learned something about trust, privacy, and fear. Sometimes, the people who seem most attentive are watching more closely than you realize. Sometimes control is invisible, calculated, quiet. Sometimes the city, the rain, the reflections, they are all part of someone else's map. And sometimes the scariest passengers are the ones you never see. Story 5. I had always hated late nights. Not because of the darkness, but because of the quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes every small sound. Raindrops against a window, the hum of a refrigerator, a distant siren, feel like it's pointing at you. Tonight it pressed hard. The city was slick with rain, neon reflections pooling in the puddles like broken glass. My phone buzzed again in my coat pocket. Another text from an old friend I hadn't seen in years, someone I barely trusted anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't want conversation, just the warmth of home, or the illusion of it. I'd recently moved. A new city, new apartment, new routine. I was fragile, recently out of a marriage that had left me feeling hollow, my confidence and trust shattered in ways therapy hadn't yet repaired. Nights were the worst. In the daytime, work and errands gave my mind enough distraction to survive. But night was a mirror I wasn't ready to look into. I stepped under the awning of a 24-hour cafe, shaking off my umbrella, waiting for the Uber I'd summoned. The driver was supposedly 10 minutes away. Rain blurred the streetlights. Steam rose from manhole covers. The air smelled of wet asphalt and coffee. I checked the app for the 100th time, arriving in 2 minutes. A black sedan pulled up silently, the windshield reflecting the neon of a nearby pharmacy sign. I almost didn't notice how quiet the engine was, how the car seemed to absorb sound rather than emit it. Evening, the driver said when I opened the door. His voice was calm, warm, reassuring. Not cheerful, not forced, just aware. I glanced at him. Mid-30s, dark eyes that studied rather than observed. Short cropped hair, precise. He smiled faintly when I slid into the back seat, the doors locking automatically with a soft click. "Must be a cold night," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, rain. Fog. Typical." "I like fog," he said. "Makes things unpredictable." I wanted to believe it was a casual observation. I told myself it made sense. The city was wet, gray, lonely. Small talk was normal. But when I checked my phone, it had no signal. LTE bars gone. A soft pulse of dread hit my chest. I tried the door. Nothing. Locked. No force, no anger, just mechanical resistance. "Everything okay?" the driver asked, not raising his voice. But his eyes seemed to trace the motion of my fingers like he had memorized them. "Yeah, I guess the locks." He nodded, almost approvingly. "Smart. Safety first." I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the tap of raindrops on the windshield, the soft scrape of wipers, the humming tires on wet asphalt made me freeze. Every nerve told me something was off. We drove. I tried to take mental notes, the street names blurred by rain. The neon of the city glowed in puddles. A billboard for a theater flickered a single frame of a horror movie poster. I shivered. He was quiet, but never inattentive. He glanced in the rearview mirror, not at me exactly, but at a reflection I didn't fully see. Then he said softly, "You've been here before, haven't you?" I stiffened. "Excuse me?" "The corner cafe you like. The one with the rain-streaked window." "I've seen you." I forced a laugh. "You have a good memory. Or a good eye." I told myself it was coincidence. I hadn't realized how often I went there alone, late at night. Surely he had simply noticed. But then he said something I hadn't told anyone. Something that should have been private. "The cappuccino, extra foam, cinnamon sprinkled just so. You always stir it counterclockwise." I froze. My pulse slammed in my ears. My hands were trembling, clutching the seat. "Must be a common habit," I said, voice tight. "Perhaps," he said, and the corner of his mouth quirked. "But habits are personal. I like to notice them." The road ahead stretched like a black ribbon under the streetlights. Fog rolled in, softening the edges of the city. Neon reflections trembled in puddles. My mind raced. My phone, my lifeline, had no signal. Every exit seemed farther than it was. I tried to reason. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I'd been fragile too long. Maybe his voice, his manner, just felt aware. That's all. We stopped at a red light. I could see my reflection in the window next to me, pale, anxious, eyes darting. He said, "You check your phone often." Little bursts of light, quick glances. "Habit too." I swallowed. "Yeah, habit. I thought so. You like to know what's near. Who's out? Who's calling? You're careful." How did he know that? How did anyone know that? I told myself it made sense. Maybe some Uber app data, some profile hints. Normal. The next turn was unfamiliar. Streets I had never driven. My heartbeat sped. "I like to know people," he said. "How they move, what they choose. Sometimes knowing is safer than trusting." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't want to talk, but my throat was dry, brittle. My phone buzzed again, signal blocked. I tried the door again. Locked. No panic yet, just a mechanical, insistent resistance. He watched me almost empathetically. "You want to get out, don't you?" I nodded slightly. "You'll get out," he said. "Eventually. But first we talk." His calmness unnerved me more than aggression. He wasn't mad. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Then the revelation started. Subtle at first. Details only someone observing for a long time would notice. "Your keys have a scratch near the fob. From last week, right? How did you know that?" I whispered. "You always fumble with them when you're nervous," he said. "I notice." I'm careful," I said. "You're careful in ways most people aren't," he said. I like careful. Every rational thought I had tried to explain it away. Maybe he had seen me on the street. Maybe it was luck. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. I wanted to believe it. Then he pulled into a quiet parking lot. Nothing around but streetlights and wet pavement. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was done. Maybe I could slip out. The car doors remained locked. My hope drowned in the cold hum of the engine. "You know," he said, voice low, almost intimate, "it's easier to understand someone when they're afraid. Fear reveals things you don't show willingly." My heart raced. My fingers were numb. I wanted to reason with him, appeal to logic, but logic felt useless. The rain tapped on the windshield in soft, hypnotic rhythm. "You're alone," he said. "But you're not really alone, are you?" I froze. Every memory of my life, the apartment I moved into, the nights I cried alone, the therapist sessions, the cautious steps I took into dating apps, into the world. He knew. He had to. I remembered the small messages I'd sent. Reminders to myself on my phone, voice memos to practice talking to people. They had disappeared. Somehow. "You can trust me," he said. "But trust is delicate, fragile. And you're fragile too." It clicked. The app. The accounts. The voice recordings. Someone had been following me. Learning me. Every habit, every little motion. The air felt tighter. My chest constricted. My mind spun. Every rationalization I had, maybe it's coincidence, maybe he's just careful, crumbled. I told myself to breathe. Focus. Think. But the minutes stretched long, drawn out. Outside, the city flickered in neon and rain. Distant jazz from a cafe floated in the fog. Footsteps echoed on wet sidewalks, blending with the hum of traffic. I didn't even notice when he moved to the front seat, turning slightly, watching me through the rearview mirror. The reflection caught in my eyes like a predator in a painting. "You're safe," he said softly. "If you do exactly what I say. Safe until the end of the night." Safe. Safe was an illusion. My phone still dead. Doors still locked. Streets unrecognizable. Hours passed like minutes. Every turn, every shadow, every minor sound, brakes, distant voices, dripping water was amplified. Finally, sirens. Far away, then closer. Relief and dread collided. "Listen," he said. "They'll arrive soon. You'll be free. But remember, I've been watching for a long time. Always." The police arrived. Flashing lights cut through rain and fog. He raised his hand slowly, calm, and stepped out. I remember my legs shaking as I stumbled onto the pavement. My hands still trembled, my lungs raw. The officers asked questions, took statements. My phone was returned, battery drained. Everything recorded for evidence. He was taken into custody. I survived, but I am not the same. I walk streets differently now. I check reflections, lights, locks. My phone never leaves my side. I'm slow to trust, and sometimes late at night, when the rain hits a window or a car door locks with a soft click, I remember him, calm, observant, meticulous. The smile that didn't need emotion to terrify. I think about trust, about how fragile it is, about privacy, boundaries, identity. How easily someone can step into your life, learn you, manipulate you, and vanish. The city is still quiet. The lights flicker. Neon pools and puddles like glass. I still take Ubers sometimes, but every time my hands hover over the lock, my pulse quickens, and I wonder, how much of me has already been seen? Sometimes survival isn't proof of safety. It's proof of vigilance. And sometimes, even when the doors finally open, you can't stop the memory of being trapped. Story 6. Have you ever canceled something because your gut screamed at you, only to realize that canceling it didn't change a thing, that it had already found a way to follow you? I did, and I'll never forget the night it happened. My name is Hannah. I was 30, recently moved to a new city after a messy breakup, trying to rebuild a life I barely recognized. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and detergent, the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards. I worked in publishing, spent my days editing manuscripts and my evenings scrolling through social media alone, wondering how it all went so wrong. It was raining that night. Not just drizzle, but a steady, relentless rain that made the city glow in neon reflections from street signs and traffic lights. I had stayed late at work, trying to finish a chapter one couldn't stop obsessing over. By the time I locked the office door behind me, the streets were nearly empty. Cars splashed past, and the hiss of wet tires was the only sound besides the distant hum of the streetlights. I opened the Uber app, ordered a ride home, and within minutes the notification pinged, a black sedan arriving soon. I waited under the awning of my building, umbrella flipping in the wind. My fingers clutched the phone like a lifeline, thumbs hovering over the cancel button as a faint unease prickled the back of my neck. Something about the car made my chest tighten. I couldn't explain it. I just knew I didn't want to get in. 5 seconds later, I pressed cancel. I should have felt relief. I should have been safe. But then, 5 minutes later, headlights cut through the fog outside my window. The same car, same color, same plate. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from the driver. You canceled the app. Not me. My stomach turned to ice. My pulse thumped in my ears. I stared at the dark sedan, rain dripping from its roof like tiny knives. My hands shook as I locked the apartment door behind me and pressed my back against it. I wanted to rationalize. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the driver had arrived before I canceled, and this was just bad timing. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it, but I didn't. I watched from my window as the car idled at the curb, headlights cutting through puddles. The wipers moved slowly, methodically, as if measuring every beat of my fear. My phone buzzed again. I know where you are. I know your friends' schedules. I know where you hide when you think you're alone. I swallowed, heart pounding, every nerve screaming that I wasn't imagining it. I tried calling my friend Claire. No answer. Tried messaging my sister. She was asleep, phone off. The apartment, normally a safe haven, felt claustrophobic. The rain tapped against the windows like fingernails, the heater hummed, the pipes groaned, all amplified in my sudden awareness of how alone I was. I tried to convince myself again. Maybe it was some kind of tech glitch. Maybe someone had a prank app. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense, but my gut twisted tighter every time the car's engine idled softly, like it was listening. When I finally left the apartment, careful, cautious, glancing over my shoulder, I kept to the side streets, neon reflections dancing on wet asphalt. Every step, every splash of water against my boots felt magnified. Every shadow in the fog looked alive. I could feel eyes on me, and I couldn't shake the certainty that they were watching. He had been following me for weeks, not hacking my social media, not breaking into my apartment. He had posed as multiple drivers, cloned Uber accounts, tracing my every movement, learning my patterns, observing my routines. Every coffee run, every bookstore visit, every quiet walk home, it had all been cataloged. I didn't know it at the time, but that was how he got close. Calm, observant, patient. He made me believe the city was mine, that I was alone. Until I wasn't. The first few nights after that, I couldn't sleep. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every car that slowed past my building made my stomach drop. I noticed him everywhere, sometimes in a black sedan at a red light, sometimes a shadow near a cafe, sometimes a fleeting reflection in a window. My apartment felt violated, every detail cataloged. Where I kept my keys, how I positioned my backpack, what music I liked at 2 a.m. Then he started messaging more directly. You like your coffee black, no sugar. I saw you this morning. I know your usual seat. You don't like crowds, so you avoid the bookstore at 6. I saw you. I wanted to believe it was harmless. I told myself it made sense. Maybe it was just coincidence, just someone too observant. Maybe I was overreacting. But each message shredded that rationalization. Weeks went on. I changed my route to work. Tried new coffee shops. Nothing helped. He adapted. Multiple accounts, multiple cars, all tracking, all observing. Every attempt to escape or hide only confirmed he had anticipated it. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. I had ordered a solo Uber, legitimate this time, through the app, desperate to get to a friend's apartment downtown. The black sedan appeared 5 minutes after I left my building. Not supposed to be there. He didn't honk, didn't wave, just idled at the curb. I called the police on speaker, keeping the line open while I stepped outside, keys in hand. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the phone. He rolled down the window, calm, precise. I've been careful, he said softly, but I know your patterns. I know your friends. I know where you think you're safe. And now you're here. The sound of rain hitting the roof of his car was deafening. Every raindrop a nail into my chest. The hum of the city seemed to fade, replaced by the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I didn't move. Couldn't move. When the police arrived, lights flashing, sirens low in the background, he didn't resist. Calmly gave his name, explained nothing. Later, investigation revealed his pattern. Cloned Uber accounts, detailed observation of multiple victims, long-term planning. Not hacking, not digital intrusion beyond the app itself. Just patience, meticulous tracking, and manipulation. I survived, but I didn't escape unscathed. My routines are fractured. I can't trust rideshare apps, can't walk the streets at night without checking for shadows, can't sleep without a light on. Every reflection, every stranger's glance, every distant siren reminds me of him. Even now, I hear the faint hum of engines on rainy streets and remember the precision of his calm, measured voice. You canceled the app. Not me. The thought that someone could be tracking, calculating, cataloging without ever entering my apartment or breaking a lock is terrifying. And it lingers. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. That privacy is fragile, safety is temporary, and obsession requires no motive, only opportunity. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen. It might be the only thing keeping you alive. Story 7. I remember stepping out of the airport that night and feeling the cold drizzle hit my cheeks like tiny pins. The last Uber was waiting under the flickering neon of a rental car lot, headlights cutting through the fog that had started to gather over the tarmac. My bag felt heavier than it should have, not from the weight of clothes or souvenirs, but from everything I'd been carrying, recent divorce, the way my reflection no longer seemed mine, the bruised edges of loneliness that pressed against my ribs. The driver was already there when I approached. Mid-40s, neatly trimmed beard, eyes that looked too calm for this hour. He smiled when I got in, not a wide, comforting smile, one of quiet, studied attention. He nodded toward the back seat. Evening, he said, voice low, warm, measured. I offered a small nod, tossed my bag onto the seat, and buckled in. The car smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic, the kind of smell you notice only when the air is quiet. I pulled my coat tighter, watching the neon streak across the wet asphalt. The city felt like it was bending around me, lights melting in puddles, fog curling over sidewalks like smoke. We left the airport in silence at first. Tires hissed against wet asphalt, wipers moving in a slow rhythm. The GPS on my phone told me we should take the highway, the most direct route. I kept my eyes on it. A sense of relief buzzed through me. I was tired. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. Alone in a hotel room in a city that had never known me, trying to reconcile my life in the quiet hum of the back seat. "You look tired," he said finally. Not a question, an observation. Calm. I shrugged. "Long day." He nodded. "I can imagine. Airports are exhausting. Travel. Waiting. Everyone pretending the world is moving faster than it really is." His words hit me in an odd way. Observant, yes, but layered. Like he could read the gaps in my sentences. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he did this all the time. Maybe he just noticed. The city lights blurred as he turned onto a side street. I glanced at the GPS. The highway should have been straight ahead. Aren't we supposed to take the highway?" I asked. My voice sounded small, even to me. He smiled faintly, his eyes catching the reflection of the neon signs in the rearview mirror. "Alternate route. Less traffic. You'll get home faster this way." I swallowed. I wanted to believe him. The streets we entered were empty. Fog hung low between the buildings, curling around street lamps. The GPS began to glitch. The route flickered, disappeared, then reappeared with a new, unfamiliar pattern. I frowned. "Signal must be off," I muttered to myself. "Ah," he said softly. "Technology betrays us sometimes, doesn't it?" I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. But then he asked the first question. "What was your childhood like?" I laughed nervously. "Excuse me? Your childhood. Tell me about it. The first memories. The ones you keep." I shifted in the seat, unease creeping through me. I told myself he was just making conversation, trying to distract me, fill the silence. I answered with vague details. A small apartment, the smell of my father's old coat, my mother humming in the kitchen. He listened. Not just listened. Absorbed. Nodded. His eyes never left the road, but they seemed to see me in a way that made my skin crawl. "You remember that because it scared you," he said softly. "And that made you who you are." I can see it. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to rationalize. Maybe he was a good listener. Maybe he was just intuitive. But every word he spoke burrowed into me. He knew my favorite coffee shop. He mentioned the jazz playlist I'd left on my phone before putting it in airplane mode. He referenced a childhood nickname I hadn't used in over a decade. I closed my eyes, tried to slow my breathing, tried to convince myself I was imagining patterns where there were none. The streets became wrong. Familiar intersections twisted into impossible angles. Buildings reflected in the fog seemed to shift as we passed. Windows glowed in shapes that didn't match reality. The GPS on my phone vanished. No signal, no map, no route, just the reflection of the car's interior, me, and him in the mirror. "Where are we?" I whispered. "Somewhere safe," he said. Calm. So calm it was unbearable. "Somewhere you can tell your story." I swallowed hard. My pulse pounded in my ears. I wanted to get out. I wanted to push the door handle, scream, run. But the doors were locked. Tires hissed, wipers swished, and the city blurred around us like paint in water. He asked another question. "Do you remember fear?" I laughed softly, nervously. I think everyone remembers fear." He nodded. "Not like this. Not fear that's preserved. Fear that feeds memory." I swallowed, my throat dry. My body felt hollow, as if my bones had emptied. "Why are you asking?" I whispered. "Because you remember more than you think," he said. "And I want to know." I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to rationalize. I wanted to believe he was just a peculiar driver, a storyteller. Maybe he'd lost someone, and he asked questions out of empathy. But then he named the cafe I always stopped at during late nights. The one I'd never told anyone about. He knew the waitress's name. He knew the song that would always play when I went in. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I looked out the window. The city was unrecognizable. Neon signs reflected in puddles, distorted, letters bleeding into one another. Fog thickened until it wrapped the street in a soft, suffocating blanket. I could barely see a block ahead. He turned. Another street. Another unfamiliar path. "Do you want to stop?" I asked, voice barely audible. "We're almost there," he said. "You'll see." The car moved slower. Tires hissed over slick pavement. Every reflection in the fog seemed to move independently, shimmering with impossible shapes. He asked me about my parents, about a dog I'd grown up with, about the exact shade of green the walls in my childhood bedroom had been. He named teachers, neighbors, songs I loved, things I had told no one. I told myself it made sense. I whispered to myself. I'm overthinking. He's observant. He notices things. But the air had changed. The warmth of the car became oppressive. The cedar scent masked something metallic, wet. The hum of the engine became a low growl in my chest. I tried to remember anything I could use. My phone, my email, social media. Someone could track me, but every app had vanished. Messages were gone. Contacts erased. It was as if the city itself had swallowed my digital life. I'm cold, I said finally, trying to break the rhythm, the tension. He nodded. I can see that. You want someone to notice you, to understand you. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the warmth of human attention, the intimacy of someone noticing me. But then I saw movement in the fog. Not a person, a reflection. In the wet asphalt, elongated, distorted. It mirrored our car. And then it didn't. I'm scared, I whispered. He leaned slightly, close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence, the subtle brush of breath. Good, he said. It's necessary. I need you to remember. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to jump. But the street stretched endlessly, the fog thickened, and I realized I wasn't moving toward home. I was moving into him. Into this. Hours, or maybe minutes, later, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the fog. A police car. Another. Their sirens cut through the night. The driver didn't resist. Calmly pulled over. Handed me my bag. My phone. Words were unnecessary. The face in the mirror was cold, satisfied. A predator, patient, precise. Someone who had traced my fear, mapped it, consumed it. Police questioned me later. They traced no evidence. No app history. No GPS logs. The driver had erased everything, vanished into the night without a trace. I returned to my apartment, rain still dripping from the fire escape. My space smelled of cold linoleum, faint coffee, the hum of my refrigerator. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I slept a little, but the reflection of neon and fog never left me. The warmth of the car, the observation, the intimate questions, they lingered in my mind like smoke. Years later, I walk alone and check my phone compulsively. I hesitate before apps open. The GPS sometimes glitches. The city feels alive and watching. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing someone can know you entirely, map your fears, manipulate your mind, and vanish before you can prove anything. The loop doesn't end. It just waits. And the stories, they are never forgotten. I survived, but I am changed. I learned that trust is fragile, privacy is an illusion, and fear is the currency of those who know us too well. Even now, when I hear the hum of a car engine on a foggy night, I wonder if the story is beginning again. Story 8. The rain had been falling for hours. Not the gentle kind that whispers against windows, but the steady, relentless drizzle that slicks streets into glass and turns city lights into fractured streaks of neon. Every puddle reflected something strange, something I couldn't name. I was alone. I had been alone for weeks. I moved across state lines after the breakup, a messy, lingering end to a relationship that had left more bruises on my heart than I cared to count. My apartment smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and loneliness. I left lights on at night to fill the silence. Humming appliances, the soft buzz of the refrigerator, even that felt like company. I opened the Uber app. The streets were empty, shiny and black, and I tapped request ride like I was summoning a ghost. The car arrived almost instantly. A gray sedan, clean and unassuming. The driver, Alex, greeted me with a soft, calm voice. He was mid-30s, with the kind of quiet attention that feels safe. Not the predatory kind, not the overly familiar kind, just present. "Where to?" he asked, eyes briefly flicking to the rearview mirror. "Just home," I said, my voice small. The back seat smelled faintly of cedar and something else I couldn't place. I slid in, listening to the rain tap the roof, the wipers swish rhythmically, the distant hum of a neon sign across the street. Then I noticed it. The rearview mirror wasn't just reflecting the interior. There were figures behind me. Shadows at first, subtle, impossible to define. I blinked. They didn't vanish. Just reflections, I muttered to myself. Alex's eyes flicked toward the mirror again, and he murmured something. Not to me, not aloud. I looked down at my phone to distract myself. Texts, emails, social media. Everything seemed normal. Nothing had changed. Still, the shadows persisted. In the corner of the mirror, I could see shapes moving, faint and translucent, like people I knew I'd never met. "Are you cold?" Alex asked, as if reading my mind. His voice was calm, soothing, observant. "No," I said, though my hands were trembling. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination. Maybe the reflection was catching a neon sign from a building behind us. Maybe the streetlights were distorted by the rain. I told myself it made sense. The ride continued. Rain streaked the windows. Neon signs fractured across the wet asphalt. And in every reflection, on the side windows, in puddles, even the rear view, the figures remained. Watching. Following. I tried rationalizing. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's stress. Maybe I'm imagining things. Alex hummed softly. A low, unobtrusive melody from the radio. He glanced at me from the mirror now, and then. Calm. Gentle. Reassuring. "You moved recently?" he asked. I nodded, voice quiet. "Yeah, a couple of months." He smiled faintly. "New city. Hard to adjust." I hesitated. I wanted to believe he was empathetic, that he understood. Maybe I'm overthinking. "Yeah, it's been different," I said. He nodded again, subtly. "I know the cafe you like. You always order the chai latte with oat milk. And your apartment, top floor, corner unit." I froze. "Excuse me?" I asked, heart hammering. "You don't remember telling me?" he said, soft, casual, as if discussing weather. "We talked about it when you first arrived." We hadn't met before. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he's good with small talk. Maybe he's observant. Maybe I'm imagining it. Then the figures shifted in the mirror. One stepped forward, closer, clearer now. It was a girl. My age, translucent, her face pale, eyes hollow. She looked directly at me. I gasped, and the car jolted slightly. Alex's hand tightened on the wheel, but his expression didn't change. "Relax," he said, calm. "She won't hurt you." I stared at him, confused, terrified. "Who what?" I whispered. Alex's gaze didn't leave the road. "She's been here before. She rides with me sometimes." I shook my head, rationalizing frantically. "No, I must be dreaming. Maybe it's a trick of the storm. Maybe I'm too tired. Maybe it's the city lights." But the figure whispered again, faint and broken. I waited. I'm still waiting. I looked down at my hands. My phone buzzed. A notification. A photo from an unknown number. Me leaving a cafe this afternoon, alone, unobserved. I hadn't posted it. I hadn't shared it. I swallowed. The figure in the mirror reached closer, her lips moving, silent. Her eyes locked on mine. Alex glanced at the mirror again, speaking softly. "She wants to be seen. That's all." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. That he was harmless. That the ghost, or whatever it was harmless. But the shadows in every reflection were multiplying. On shop windows. On wet asphalt. On the shiny side panel of the car. They were everywhere. Following. Patient. Watching. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "You see her. Only you can see her." I shook, my knuckles white against the phone. "Are you okay back there?" Alex asked again, voice calm. Observant. "Yes." Yeah," I said, voice trembling. The ride felt longer than it should have. Every streetlight, every puddle, every neon glow seemed to carry them closer. The girl, the shadows, the shapes in the back seat, they were merging with reality. I caught a glimpse in a cafe window, a reflection of myself, trembling, but behind me another figure. Pale, watching, waiting. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it's me projecting. Maybe it's my mind trying to deal with loneliness. Maybe this is a hallucination. But the details they revealed were impossible. They knew things I hadn't told anyone. My favorite mug, the song I hummed in the shower, the apartment number I hadn't shared. "Stop," I whispered, barely audible. Alex didn't respond. His eyes flicked to the mirror again, murmuring softly, like talking to someone invisible. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But the figure stayed, hovering, patient, watching. Finally, we reached my street. Rain plastered my hair to my forehead. Streetlights fractured across wet asphalt. The girl stepped back in the mirror. Gone. Just my reflection. Alex glanced at me. "You'll be fine," he said. Calm, soothing, like nothing had happened. I stumbled out of the car, shaking, cold, drenched. I didn't thank him. I didn't look back. I wanted to run. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, shivering. The hum of the refrigerator sounded deafening. The faucet dripped in the bathroom. The city outside was alive with rain, sirens, distant jazz. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I didn't answer. Over the next week, the shadows followed. Not in person, not physically, but in every reflection. Windows, mirrors, screens, storefronts, my own apartment. Emails arrived from burner accounts, detailing my routines. Photos of me leaving cafes, walking streets I hadn't posted about. Every detail known, every habit observed. I installed new locks, changed routines, bought cameras, but it didn't stop. I called the police. They checked logs, metadata, phone records. Nothing concrete. Alex's account was legitimate. No record of any previous riders disappearing. I began to realize the truth. The ghost was real. The car, the driver, normal. The manipulation, the surveillance, the obsession, insidious and human. Weeks later, a detective contacted me. They'd tracked a series of disappearances. Young women, similar patterns, same car model, same city. Alex wasn't involved. But the online tracking, the surveillance, the obsession, one individual, constructing identities, manipulating evidence, feeding narratives. I never learned their real name. Only the pattern, the obsession, the impossibly detailed stalking. The police intervened eventually. I changed my number, my routines, my online presence. I moved apartments, but the paranoia stayed. Every reflection, every window, every puddle carries the memory. I still catch glimpses sometimes, shadows that aren't mine, faces that watch. I've learned boundaries aren't just lines you draw. They're fragile constructs. Privacy is an illusion. Memory can be manipulated. Sometimes surviving isn't enough. You carry it with you. In reflections, in neon, in the hum of appliances, in the spaces where people should be normal but aren't. And every ride I take at night, I glance in the rear view. Just in case. Because some mirrors don't show the world around you. They show the world watching you. Story 9. I had always hated late nights. Not because of the darkness, but because of the quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes every small sound. Raindrops against a window, the hum of a refrigerator, a distant siren, feel like it's pointing at you. Tonight, it pressed hard. The city was slick with rain, neon reflections pooling in the puddles like broken glass. My phone buzzed again in my coat pocket. Another text from an old friend I hadn't seen in years, someone I barely trusted anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't want conversation, just the warmth of home, or the illusion of it. I'd recently moved. A new city, new apartment, new routine. I was fragile, Recently out of a marriage that had left me feeling hollow, my confidence and trust shattered in ways therapy hadn't yet repaired. Nights were the worst. In the daytime, work and errands gave my mind enough distraction to survive. But night was a mirror I wasn't ready to look into. I stepped under the awning of a 24-hour cafe, shaking off my umbrella, waiting for the Uber I'd summoned. The driver was supposedly 10 minutes away. Rain blurred the streetlights. Steam rose from manhole covers. The air smelled of wet asphalt and coffee. I checked the app for the 100th time, arriving in 2 minutes. A black sedan pulled up silently, the windshield reflecting the neon of a nearby pharmacy sign. I almost didn't notice how quiet the engine was, how the car seemed to absorb sound rather than emit it. "Evening," the driver said when I opened the door. His voice was calm, warm, reassuring. Not cheerful, not forced, just aware. I glanced at him. Mid-30s, dark eyes that studied rather than observed. Short cropped hair, precise. He smiled faintly when I slid into the back seat, the doors locking automatically with a soft click. "Must be a cold night," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, rain. Fog. Typical." "I like fog," he said. "Makes things unpredictable." I wanted to believe it was a casual observation. I told myself it made sense. The city was wet, gray, lonely. Small talk was normal. But when I checked my phone, it had no signal. LTE bars gone. A soft pulse of dread hit my chest. I tried the door. Nothing. Locked. No force, no anger, just mechanical resistance. "Everything okay?" the driver asked, not raising his voice. But his eyes seemed to trace the motion of my fingers like he had memorized them. "Yeah, I guess the locks." He nodded, almost approvingly. "Smart. Safety first." I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but the tap of raindrops on the windshield, the soft scrape of wipers, the humming tires on wet asphalt, made me freeze. Every nerve told me something was off. We drove. I tried to take mental notes, the street names blurred by rain. The neon of the city glowed in puddles. A billboard for a theater flickered a single frame of a horror movie poster. I shivered. He was quiet, but never inattentive. He glanced in the rearview mirror, not at me exactly, but at a reflection I didn't fully see. Then he said softly, "You've been here before, haven't you?" I stiffened. "Excuse me?" "The corner cafe you like. The one with the rain-streaked window." "I've seen you." I forced a laugh. "You have a good memory. Or a good eye." I told myself it was coincidence. I hadn't realized how often I went there alone, late at night. Surely, he had simply noticed. But then he said something I hadn't told anyone. Something that should have been private. "The cappuccino, extra foam, cinnamon sprinkled just so. You always stir it counterclockwise." I froze. My pulse slammed in my ears. My hands were trembling, clutching the seat. "Must be a common habit," I said, voice tight. "Perhaps," he said, and the corner of his mouth quirked. "But habits are personal. I like to notice them." The road ahead stretched like a black ribbon under the streetlights. Fog rolled in, softening the edges of the city. Neon reflections trembled in puddles. My mind raced. My phone, my lifeline, had no signal. Every exit seemed farther than it was. I tried to reason. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I'd been fragile too long. Maybe his voice, his manner, just felt aware. That's all. We stopped at a red light. I could see my reflection in the window next to me, pale, anxious, eyes darting. He said, "You check your phone often." Little bursts of light, quick glances. "Habit too." I swallowed. "Yeah, habit. I thought so. You like to know what's near. Who's out? Who's calling? You're careful." How did he know that? How did anyone know that? I told myself it made sense. Maybe some Uber app data, some profile hints. Normal. The next turn was unfamiliar. Streets I had never driven. My heartbeat sped. "I like to know people," he said. "How they move, what they choose. Sometimes, knowing is safer than trusting." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't want to talk, but my throat was dry, brittle. My phone buzzed again, signal blocked. I tried the door again. Locked. No panic yet. just a mechanical, insistent resistance. He watched me almost empathetically. "You want to get out, don't you?" I nodded slightly. "You'll get out," he said. "Eventually. But first we talk." His calmness unnerved me more than aggression. He wasn't mad. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. Then the revelation started. Subtle at first. Details only someone observing for a long time would notice. "Your keys have a scratch near the fob. From last week, right?" "How did you know that?" I whispered. "You always fumble with them when you're nervous," he said. "I notice." I'm careful," I said. "You're careful in ways most people aren't," he said. I like careful. Every rational thought I had tried to explain it away. Maybe he had seen me on the street. Maybe it was luck. Maybe I was reading too much into everything. I wanted to believe it. Then he pulled into a quiet parking lot. Nothing around but street lights and wet pavement. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was done. Maybe I could slip out. The car doors remained locked. My hope drowned in the cold hum of the engine. "You know," he said, voice low, almost intimate, "it's easier to understand someone when they're afraid. Fear reveals things you don't show willingly." My heart raced. My fingers were numb. I wanted to reason with him, appeal to logic, but logic felt useless. The rain tapped on the windshield in soft, hypnotic rhythm. "You're alone," he said. "But you're not really alone, are you?" I froze. Every memory of my life, the apartment I moved into, the nights I cried alone, the therapist sessions, the cautious steps I took into dating apps, into the world, he knew. He had to. I remembered the small messages I'd sent, reminders to myself on my phone, voice memos to practice talking to people. They had disappeared. Somehow. "You can trust me," he said. "But trust is delicate, fragile. And you're fragile too." It clicked. The app. The accounts. The voice recordings. Someone had been following me. Learning me. Every habit, every little motion. The air felt tighter. My chest constricted. My mind spun. Every rationalization I had, maybe it's coincidence, maybe he's just careful, crumbled. I told myself to breathe. Focus. Think. But the minutes stretched, long, drawn out. Outside, the city flickered in neon and rain. Distant jazz from a cafe floated in the fog. Footsteps echoed on wet sidewalks, blending with the hum of traffic. I didn't even notice when he moved to the front seat, turning slightly, watching me through the rearview mirror. The reflection caught in my eyes like a predator in a painting. "You're safe," he said softly. "If you do exactly what I say. Safe until the end of the night." Safe. Safe was an illusion. My phone still dead. Doors still locked. Streets unrecognizable. Hours passed like minutes. Every turn, every shadow, every minor sound, brakes, distant voices, dripping water was amplified. Finally, sirens. Far away, then closer. Relief and dread collided. "Listen," he said. "They'll arrive soon. You'll be free. But remember, I've been watching for a long time. Always." The police arrived. Flashing lights cut through rain and fog. He raised his hands slowly, calm, and stepped out. I remember my legs shaking as I stumbled onto the pavement. My hands still trembled, my lungs raw. The officers asked questions, took statements. My phone was returned, battery drained. Everything recorded for evidence. He was taken into custody. I survived. But I am not the same. I walk streets differently now. I check reflections, lights, locks. My phone never leaves my side. I'm slow to trust. And sometimes late at night, when the rain hits a window or a car door locks with a soft click, I remember him, calm, observant, meticulous. The smile that didn't need emotion to terrify. I think about trust, about how fragile it is. About privacy, boundaries, identity. How easily someone can step into your life, learn you, manipulate you, and vanish. The city is still quiet. The lights flicker. Neon pools and puddles like glass. I still take Ubers sometimes. But every time, my hands hover over the lock, my pulse quickens, and I wonder, how much of me has already been seen? Sometimes, survival isn't proof of safety. It's proof of vigilance. And sometimes, even when the doors finally open, You can't stop the memory of being trapped.